Make sure that that's running correctly. And it is, and I'm going to turn it over to the judges.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Mark Simons. I am just located barely a little bit south of you in Nevada, Reno, Nevada. And I know you've been waiting quite a while to get your opportunity. So this is your opportunity. Take some deep breaths, get ready. I practiced law for 29 years down here. It's been fantastic. And I keep telling teams that, look, you can get paid to do what you're doing. So don't give up on this government, we the people stuff. It's a launch pad into greater things. So what I'll do is after the other judges introduce themselves, we'll ask you to introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into the questions. Thanks.
My name is Charlie Hinderleiter. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the St. Louis Realtors Association in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a former political science professor, and many years ago, I was on that side of the proverbial table as a student in the We the People program. I also see Rebecca's in the room, so I suppose we should be on good behavior. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Milton from New York. Yes, New York City. I just want to make a plug that, yes, you can get paid for doing what Judge Simons does, but you can also get paid for a career in public service, which is my story. I'm a lawyer by training, but you work in the government, you can really have some really interesting and constitutional issues to think about. I am currently the Chief of Staff in the Inspector General's office for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. That's the state agency that oversees New York City subways and buses and the commuter rails in the New York metropolitan area. Just prior to this, I was the circuit executive. That's the chief operating officer of the Second Circuit, which are the 13 federal courts in the states of New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. I'm glad you're here. We're looking forward to a great conversation. And I'm going to turn it back to Judge Simons.
Thank you. Can you now take the opportunity to introduce yourselves and your teacher or coach?
Hello, my name's Civic Virtue, a senior here at our Idaho School of Meridian Medical Arts Charter High School, and our coach is Blake Goday.
Hi, I'm Colette Hansen. I'm also a senior at MOX, and as Xavier said, Blake Goday is our coach.
And then I'm Noah Rutherford, also senior with these guys here at Meridian Medical.
All right. I'm going to lead with question one. Get yourselves ready because time to show off. And when I complete the question, feel free to begin when ready. The American War is over, but this is far from being the case with the American Revolution. To what extent, if any, did revolutionary principles influence constitution making during the founding period? What problems, if any, does the principle of consent present when creating or amending constitutions? To what extent, if any, are revolutionary principles evident in modern times?
Almost every American is familiar with the Constitution and Bill of Rights. However, the philosophies that contributed to their creation are often overlooked. During the Revolutionary War, the founders fought for principles that they believed were crucial to a successful government. Natural rights, civic duty, and limited government are all revolutionary principles that influenced the creation of the Constitution. But no one principle is more important than popular sovereignty. The idea of popular sovereignty is an innately American philosophy. After its use in the formation of our government, we saw many other countries follow and have a government based on the will of the people. A major issue sparking the American Revolution was colonists' belief that governmental power should not be in the hands of a single royal family. Having a king or queen be sovereign and all other citizens being subjects was an ideal that the framers thought should be eradicated. Instead, they believed that government officials should be elected by the people for the people, and those with power were no more worthy than the individuals who elected them. As the framers drafted the Declaration of Independence, they wrote, "Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." This quote cemented popular sovereignty as a founding principle in the United States government.
The principle of consent thus plays an essential role in creating and amending constitutions, especially in the American political system. Philosophers like John Locke, who strongly influenced the founders, argue that citizens form for themselves a social contract in which they sacrifice a small amount of their natural freedom to a government whose protection makes them more free to live their lives than otherwise would be possible. When a government repeatedly violates this contract by taking more freedom freedom than is necessary, and especially when it violates the rights that it was created to protect, the founders believed that people had a right and a duty to abolish and replace it with something better. That is precisely what they did when they declared independence from Great Britain. As John Locke explained in his second treatise of civil government, the only legitimate government was one to which the people had given consent. The founders believed in this principle, but they also knew the desires of people should be constrained. They aimed to create, therefore, a republic, a society in which the people are sovereign, but which at the same time limits the power, but at which the same time limits the power of government in order to protect individual freedoms. To combat abuse of minority rights by majorities, for example, the founders strictly limited the powers of the federal government and added the Constitution a Bill of Rights, listing some rights that our national government should never infringe, even when a large majority of voters wanted to violate them. They also split the functions of government so that no single persuasive person can get control of all of it. Their hope was that ambitious government officials would keep an eye on others' actions and prevent any one person from gaining too much power. Their even greater hope was that the people would exercise our popular sovereignty to elect virtuous leaders who believed in freedom and who uphold the Constitution. While they believed that the only just government is one based on the consent of citizens to be governed, they also believed that citizens have to be worthy of such authority. As John Adams once wrote, public virtue cannot exist in a nation without private virtue, and public virtue is the only foundation of republics.
We continue to see the revolutionary principle of popular sovereignty and in turn consent within our modern republic. In fact, we display this principle more prominently than our founding fathers, thanks to the adoption of the 15th and 19th Amendments. As a result, the people gained power since more individuals can exercise their right to vote to elect individuals representative of their values and ideas. The 2020 election is the greatest and most recent modern example. Over 159 million Americans, nearly 2/3 of all eligible individuals voted. Voters altered the American political landscape by tying the Senate with 50 senators from each party and by having President Biden elected through the Electoral College with 306 electoral votes to 223. It is this ability for the people to vote in the elections that makes popular sovereignty unique and central to every principle found within the Constitution. However, it is important to understand the differences between the people having the power and the people consenting and electing to be governed. This is a concept noted by Benjamin Rush in a historic essay titled An Address to the People. Should I continue going, or is it?
Now we get to ask you some questions.
No, it's time. Yep.
That's time.
All right. So I want to piggyback off this idea that you guys mentioned about public and private virtue. Talk to me a little bit more about the importance of public and private virtue and how that ties in to the principles that you mentioned at the opening of your prepared statement.
Yeah, so I would say that this is part of civic duty. And when the founders created the Constitution and our government, they expected the people within to involve themselves within their political parties and their systems, and to be an active member in their communities, and to educate themselves on people who would represent them well, and hold up the Constitution. And this goes into in our personal lives and outside, being involved in the community, but also learning on our own time.
Jump in here, just piggybacking a little bit off what she said. Like, we talked about the importance of popular sovereignty, and I think civic virtue is one of the biggest things that goes along with that, because you need to be active and involved in your communities and your governments for popular sovereignty to work. You can't, just not vote, not take action in your communities and expect our government to run how it's supposed to be. So that's why this civic virtue is such an important aspect.
So picking up on that theme, that civic virtue plays off popular sovereignty, and popular sovereignty doesn't work without civic virtue. So what about people who who protest or who feel disenfranchised, but they're not voting? One of the facts that came out of January 6th, and depending on your point of view, the insurrection or the revolution, was that many of the people who took part in the storming of the Capitol had not even voted in the election they were protesting. So how do we have the consent of the government when you don't even, consent of the governed, when you don't have significant portion? I mean, 60+% is good, but you don't have 100% of the governed participating in their government. What do you think about that?
I think that is an interesting thing to talk about. I guess from my perspective, in reference to civic duty and being a citizen of the United States and being this grand republic that we have, people have the option to exercise their right to vote or not. They have the option to consent to the governed. And furthermore, by having the power to vote, to elect individuals, they can utilize their power to say, like, no, I don't like these people. I don't like their policies. I don't stand up for these values. They don't represent me. But in regards to the insurrection of the Capitol, I think it's a lot to do with our current, I guess, political climate in regards to like the internet and the spread of misinformation. A lot of people, I think, especially at that time, kind of don't trust the system enough to vote and don't believe that it's secure enough to enact our republic. But I think a lot of civic duty and education can go a long way to kind of help counteract these effects, so that we get a lot of people being more cooperative within our republic, being more outstanding citizens and understanding the current world and the current issues, and that we can have a better society as a result.
To jump in on that, I think this also plays into this kind of idea of not just consent, but informed consent of our people. A lot of people misunderstand how our government actually works, because we tout democracy, 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 but that's not really what we live in. And that kind of is where you see this toxic populism in which people think that the majority should rule. If they vote or things happen and they don't go the way that they believe it should because they feel that they are of the majority, it starts to create this distrust within the government because they don't understand why things went that way. And so another way to combat this is, I think, more public education about government. We take one government class in high school and that's about it. And I'm sure like the government class that I got is great, but for these Americans who are of voting age for a long time, they probably didn't get that same education. So I think it's important to start including that more in our education, but also to start programs in which we reach out to communities where maybe there's a lot of misunderstanding and help them learn about how our government works and how they're represented, so that we can rebond that bond of trust between our citizens and the government.
And then if I could jump in real quick, building off that informed consent piece, I think especially what we saw with the Capitol insurrectionists was, that idea that they're so confused as why this election went this way, because they're only surrounded by people who are like them. They believe, they're in Facebook communities, they're, a lot of their friends are the same thing. So they don't see the whole variety of, the different opinions when you're just surrounded by one single opinion, and that's all you kind of immerse yourself into. That is, you're not getting a full scope, and it ends up having some detrimental consequences, as we saw.
I want to take off on that thread and bring us to current events. Starting with the civil rights marches. We've got the BLM. We've got the events on January 6th. How do you relate these current events in relation to the concepts of John Locke that you pulled out earlier in your prepared statement to comply with social contract and or to challenge the social contract? So how do you compare the current events with what was the original concepts presented by John Locke?
I think they're actually a really great example of exactly what John Locke was talking about, and the founders' beliefs that, if we feel that our government is infringing on our rights or not giving us the rights that are the same as other people, especially when it comes to people of color and women getting the right to vote and things like that, we have the right to go out and protest and say, hey, we're upset about these things. We want these things to change. These things are wrong. So that's how I would relate it to the idea of them just being able to come out and abolish whatever they feel needs to be abolished.
I'd also like to agree with Colette in that that's how I kind of relate the social contract to current events. People protesting, making their opinions heard, that they don't agree with the current system. They don't agree with the current state of the world. And of course, with the freedom of speech, freedom of protest, to assemble, I think that goes a long way, that in saying that we don't agree with what's going on. The social contract we have is broken, or at the very least a bit damaged and dented, and that we want to, as the people, as in Black Lives Matter, and I guess to a certain extent with the insurrectionists, how they want to, I guess, come together to fix what they perceive to be problems and what might actually be physical problems within the society. So I think we have a lot of tools within our Constitution to help kind of negotiate the social contract.
I build off Xavier a little bit. I think that it's great that people are going out and, if they're feeling like the government's infringing on their rights, they have that opportunity to go out and protest and, advocate for themselves. But again, tying this back to kind of the first thing we talked about was these people have to be educated on their system, or it ends up causing a lot of chaos, because if they aren't, really in tune to what's going on, they could be protesting the wrong things. They can be protesting against rights that they think they have and don't, or the other way around. So it kind of all goes together. Oh, should I?
Go ahead and finish. Okay, good job. Great job, yay. Okay, all right. So now we're gonna do some feedback from the judges.
Thank you very much for our conversation today. It's one where I wish we had more time. That went by too quickly. You guys took this in a different direction than we've heard this afternoon, and we've heard a few of these so far. I really liked your conversation about public and private virtue and how that related to some of the principles you discussed. I thought that was a really interesting way to take that. And I thought you guys had a nice conversation about that. And then kind of that connection between civic virtue and popular sovereignty. I thought that was a really good point in conversation that you guys were able to make. I think you guys made a number of really interesting points. The notion of informed consent, toxic population, the tools to negotiate the social contract, just some really interesting ideas that you guys were able to really show that you were able to really dig in and understand these concepts and to be able to apply them across, a couple hundred years of history. So thank you.
I would just echo that. I thought very nicely done. I thought you did a great job of talking about the key principles of the American Revolution and bringing it forward. And I would just say the same thing. I think you were the first team to talk about public and private virtue, which is a primary concept for the framers. And I really enjoyed the conversation. Really nicely done. And I loved how you tied it into the idea of, this is for the Center for Civic Education, the need to have an educated citizenry, and that it doesn't just stop when you get out of school, that adults need to be educated. And I thought that was a great plug for the center and what they're doing and for the program that you're in. So kudos to you. Great job.
First of all, I want to compliment you guys and to let you know that don't lose track of where you are. You're in the nationals, and you are talking about the educated citizenry. Be engaged. And what do you think all the founding fathers were doing? They were the educated. They were the knowledgeable. They were the ones with the framework, and they put it together. And so when you keep saying, hey, look, what can we do? Be involved, be engaged, education. Well, guess what? Exactly the whole purpose and point that was being dealt with originally. And when you say magic words like be engaged and educate yourself and give back, I mean, look, that's exactly what we're doing here. So the other things I want to flip it, I got to comment on that toxic populism as well, because I certainly, I'm like, that was a cool phrase. If you're going to throw out those cool phrases, just pound it home. I mean, that was really cool. And it's a very colorful and engaging and powerful word and phraseology. So again, you guys are the tip of the spear. You're the ones who are going to be carrying this moving forward. In a few years, you're going to be sitting on this side judging the next generation. So congratulations, well done. Thank you.
All right, good job. Woohoo.
Yeah, thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, judges.
Thank
I
you.
didn't go anywhere. I'm